The terminal pulsed with life. Rolling suitcases zipped across polished floors, announcements crackled overhead, and hurried footsteps merged into a restless symphony. Los Angeles International Airport, the crossroads of dreams and desperation, bustled under the harsh midday sun. Through the swirling chaos, a man moved unnoticed. Keanu wore a plain gray hoodie, jeans scuffed at the knees and sneakers that had seen better days. His steps were measured, his presence unassuming, almost as if he didn't exist at all. But there was something about him, a gravity just. Beneath the surface, quiet but undeniable. Victor Hawthorne didn't notice it. Victor burst into the terminal like he owned it. Designer sunglasses, perfectly tailored suit, a Bluetooth earpiece flashing like a badge of importance. His voice cut through the din as he barked into his phone, complaints flowing about slow service, incompetent staff, and how no one works hard anymore. In Victor's world, there were winners and losers, and he didn't need more than a glance to decide which category Keanu fell into. Victor's gaze brushed across the hooded man, dismissing him with a smirk. Another nobody, another ghost cluttering up the world he ruled. Without a second thought, Victor shoved past him to the priority line where a board attendant greeted him with strained politeness. Keanu simply stepped aside, eyes steady, unspeaking. But if Victor had looked closer, if he'd paused for even a second, he might have seen the quiet fire behind those calm eyes, might have sensed that this wasn't an accident, that some meetings are not by chance but by design. Because what Victor didn't know was that this man, this stranger he so casually dismissed, was about to hold a mirror up to his very soul. And when he saw what was reflected back, he wouldn't like what he found. Not one bit. The glimmering glass walls of LAX reflected the frenzied pace of early morning travelers. Wheels of polished suitcases clicked against the marble floors, murmured announcements echoed overhead, and the scent of burnt espresso drifted from overworked coffee stands. Among the sea of determined faces, Victor Langston moved like a shark. Tailored navy suit, designer shoes clicking with authority, sunglasses perched arrogantly on his head even indoors. He checked his Rolex and sighed loudly, making sure the people around him noticed. The line for first class was moving slowly, too slowly for a man like him. It was then he noticed him, a man standing a few feet ahead. Tall, broad-shouldered, but in a plain black hoodie and worn jeans, a duffel slung casually over one shoulder. Out of place. Victor's lips curled into a smirk. "First-class lines this way, buddy," he said, just loud enough to carry over the murmuring crowd. The man turned. Calm hazel eyes met Victor's. No flash of anger, no embarrassment, just a slight nod. "No," he said simply. Victor's smirk faltered for a fraction of a second. Then, recovering, he chuckled and shook his head dramatically. "Hey, no judgment. Sometimes they upgrade people to make the flight look better." No response. The stranger simply turned back toward the counter, adjusting the strap on his duffel. The boarding agent, recognizing him instantly, greeted him with an enthusiastic, almost deferential smile. Victor's eyebrows lifted. Weird. Boarding was called moments later. Victor ensured he was one of the first onto the jet bridge, practically bulldozing past a group of elderly tourists. Efficiency, he told himself. Winners didn't wait. As he stowed his briefcase and sank into the buttery leather of seat 2A, he pulled out his phone, ready to ignore the world. Then, a shadow over his shoulder, the same man, the nobody in the hoodie, slid effortlessly into seat 2B right beside him. Victor blinked, the air around him growing thick with a tension he couldn't explain. He watched from the corner of his eye as the man stored his duffel neatly overhead and sat down with a kind of quiet, practiced ease. No fuss, no entitlement. Victor adjusted in his seat, already feeling the need to assert his superiority. "Also, night at the terminal?" he asked, voice dripping casual condescension. "Or late upgrade?" He laughed, a short, sharp bark, as if the joke were so obvious. The man turned his head, meeting Victor's gaze again. "No," he said evenly. "Ticket's been booked for a while." Victor laughed again, louder this time, attracting a curious glance from a passing flight attendant. Well, enjoy the experience. First class is different, not everyone's used to it. He let the words hang heavy, like cigar smoke in an old room. The stranger didn't rise to the bait, didn't defend himself, just offered the barest hint of a smile, a private, almost pitying thing, before turning to look out the window. Victor felt something unfamiliar stir in his chest. Discomfort, irritation. The man should have been defensive, should have stammered or looked away, or at least acknowledged the superiority Victor was offering like a gift. Instead, he sat there, calm and silent, as if he belonged, as if Victor's opinions didn't matter at all. The captain's voice crackled overhead, announcing a slight delay on the runway. Victor sighed theatrically and opened his laptop with a snap. Beside him, the stranger pulled out nothing but a battered paperback, Steinbeck of Mice and Men, and began reading. Victor stole glances at the worn cover, the frayed pages. Who still read books on planes? He thought with a sneer. Who still read books at all? Time crawled. Victor made half-hearted attempts at conversation, mostly thinly veiled barbs about wealth, taste, and success. First class isn't just about money, you know, he said once, twirling the stem of his empty champagne flute between two fingers. It's about a certain lifestyle, a certain expectation. Not everyone's cut out for it. The man nodded thoughtfully as if considering it seriously. Maybe, he said simply. Victor's words, so carefully crafted to wound, fell harmlessly to the floor between them. And somehow that was worse than an argument, worse than anger. It was irrelevance. The engines roared, the plane lifted, and the city below fell away in a patchwork of lights and roads and small dreams. In the hush of altitude, Victor sat, stewing in his own importance, while the stranger next to him turned another quiet page. And somewhere, deep beneath the surface, the first fault lines of something much bigger had begun to shift. The calm. Before the awakening, the plane's engines hummed low, a white noise that filled the lavish first-class cabin. Leather seats cradled the wealthy and important, champagne glasses clinked softly, and waitstaff hovered like ghosts in the background. Yet at seat 2A, Victor Sinclair was growing increasingly restless. It wasn't turbulence that unsettled him. It was the man sitting quietly beside him, Keanu. Victor sipped his imported whiskey with theatrical care, throwing occasional glances at his neighbor. Keanu simply leaned back, cradling a glass of water between his calloused hands, his posture easy, his gaze distant. Victor couldn't help himself. He hated stillness. It made him feel small. And nothing about Keanu's presence made sense to him. Not even a scotch? Victor quipped, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. Water's good, Keanu replied, voice low and unhurried. Victor smiled tightly. Well, suit yourself. Guess not everyone appreciates the finer things. Keanu's lips barely curved into a smile. Sometimes the finer things aren't in a glass. Victor scoffed under his breath. You sound like one of those simplicity is happiness people. No offense, but money does make life better. Anyone who says otherwise just doesn't have enough of... Keanu turned his head, finally meeting Victor's eyes. Not with judgment, but with an unsettling patience. Maybe money makes things easier. But easy and better aren't always the same. Victor shifted in his seat, the expensive leather squeaking beneath him. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by someone wearing scuffed boots and a plain black hoodie. It grated at him like an invisible itch he couldn't reach. He forced a laugh. You must be in the wrong section, my friend. First class isn't exactly known for humility. Keanu's gaze didn't waver. Maybe that's the problem. The words fell like a stone between them. Heavy, unpretentious, impossible to ignore. Victor chuckled again, but the sound rang hollow in his ears. He turned his body toward the aisle, as if physical distance might restore the illusion of superiority he so desperately needed. Across the aisle, a woman in a crisp business suit watched the exchange over the rim of her coffee cup. A flight attendant. Two lingered a moment too long when refilling the water pitcher. Victor caught their glances and stiffened. It wasn't admiration he saw mirrored there. It was pity. Worse yet, disappointment. Victor drained his whiskey in a single gulp. "So," he said, stretching the word, reaching for familiar ground. "What is it you do? Let me guess. Life coach, motivational speaker?" Keanu chuckled softly, a sound like a stream flowing over rocks. "No titles," he said. "Just live." Victor snorted. "Must be nice. No pressure, no ambition. Some of us have to build things. Empires don't just happen." "No," Keanu agreed, tilting his glass thoughtfully. "But sometimes, empires fall for the same reason they rise." Victor blinked. "And what's that supposed to mean?" Keanu leaned back again, looking out the window where the sunset bathed the sky in molten gold. "Pride," he said simply. Victor clenched, his jaw feeling an unfamiliar sting behind his ribs. Something about Keanu's presence was rearranging the air around him, exposing cracks he'd worked a lifetime to plaster over. Without lifting a finger, without raising his voice, Keanu was chipping away at the polished armor Victor had wrapped around himself. And Victor hated how naked it made him feel. "Listen, pal," Victor said finally, voice lower now. "You don't know me. You don't know what it takes to get here, to stay here." Keanu nodded slowly. "You're right. I don't know your story. But I know this. The higher we build ourselves, without roots, the harder we fall." Victor looked away, swallowing the sudden lump in his throat. The plane cruised smoothly through the evening sky, but inside Victor, a different turbulence was beginning to rise. Quiet, relentless, and entirely of his own making. As he sat there, surrounded by luxury, Victor Sinclair, CEO, self-made man, first-class citizen, felt a gnawing fear he hadn't felt in years. The fear that maybe he had built everything on. And sitting beside him was a stranger who, without a single accusation, was making him wonder if he even knew who he truly was anymore. To be continued. Victor's patience, if he had any, shattered with the brittle grace of glass. The hum of the plane, the soft clink of ice in whiskey glasses, the muted conversations of first-class travelers, it all blurred into a single, searing focus. Keanu. For the past 2 hours, Victor had tried everything. Mockery masked as humor. Condescension wrapped in faux camaraderie. A full buffet of jabs at Keanu's plain black t-shirt, his battered sneakers, the absence of a Rolex weighing down his wrist. And yet Keanu hadn't cracked once. Every answer had been maddeningly simple. Every glance disarmingly calm. Victor shifted in his plush seat, his voice suddenly louder, slicing through the cabin's luxury hush. "You know," he said, swirling the remains of his bourbon, "some people buy their way into first class. Others," he let the word dangle, dripping venom. "Others just get lucky, I guess." Across the aisle, a couple of passengers flicked their eyes toward them. Subtle, curious. The tension had become a living thing, crawling across the cabin like electricity before a storm. Keanu didn't flinch. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, as if examining Victor through a lens too old, too wise, to feel insulted. "Luck," Keanu said quietly, "is often confused with grace." Victor barked a laugh, short and sharp, earning another sidelong glance from a man in a tailored gray suit. "And what exactly do you know about grace, pal?" Victor snapped, voice rising half a register. "You think sitting here sipping your free water makes you something?" Keanu's gaze didn't waver. "No," he said, voice like a still pond. "What makes me something is invisible to seats and titles." Victor's laugh was hollow this time, echoing off the soft leather around him. He opened his mouth, ready to launch into another tirade, when a warm voice interrupted. "Mr. Reeves?" The flight attendant appeared, smiling with the kind of genuine warmth reserved for rare, beloved figures. "We just wanted to thank you again for your incredible kindness with the ground crew." It really meant a lot. The words floated in the air. "Hung there, Mr. Reeves." The name hit Victor like a punch he never saw coming. Whispers rippled through the first-class cabin, traveling faster than sound. Passengers craned discreetly to catch a glimpse, their faces registering recognition, awe, and sudden understanding. The scruffy hair, the unassuming clothes, the quiet presence. Keanu Reeves. Victor froze, the color draining from his face, the bourbon glass slipping a fraction in his hand. The attendant, oblivious to the unfolding. Humiliation continued brightly. "If there's anything you need, please don't hesitate." Keanu smiled, nodding a thank you. When she left, he turned back to Victor, not with anger, not with smugness, but with a calm so profound it was almost unbearable. And then, he spoke the words that would echo in Victor's mind long after. The flight landed, long after the shame curdled into something harder to carry. "Respect," Keanu said gently, "isn't about who someone is, it's about who you are." Victor sat there, hollowed out. Every cruel jab he had made, every assumption he had worn like armor, every shallow measure of worth he had worshipped, laid bare, and none of it could shield him now. Keanu leaned back in his seat, closing his eyes as if the conversation had already been forgotten. Around them, the cabin returned to its quiet symphony of soft footsteps, muted laughter, the occasional pop of a champagne cork. But for Victor, the noise was deafening. He wasn't staring at Keanu Reeves' movie star. He was staring at himself, and, for the first time in a long, long time, he didn't like what he saw. As the plane touched down, the seatbelt sign flicked off with a familiar chime. Passengers around them buzzed with low conversations, casting curious glances toward Keanu. Some whispered excitedly, others just stared, stunned that they had shared a flight with someone so quietly monumental. Victor sat frozen in his seat, staring at his own trembling hands. For the first time in years, he wasn't calculating, boasting, or scheming. He was reflecting. All his life he'd chased titles, possessions, applause. Yet here was a man, one of the most beloved and recognizable figures on the planet, who carried none of it like a weapon, no entourage, no pretense, just kindness, stillness, and a strength so deep it unsettled everything Victor thought. He knew. Keanu rose to leave, giving Victor a brief, almost forgiving nod. No malice, no mockery, just a silent acknowledgement, a kindness that stung more than any insult could have. At the door, a flight attendant shyly asked for a photo. Keanu smiled warmly, agreeing without hesitation, crouching to make a nervous young fan feel taller. He didn't need the spotlight. He was the light, precisely because he never demanded it. Victor remained seated long after most had deplaned, feeling like a man who had come face to face with a truth he could no longer outrun. Respect isn't about who someone is. It's about who you are. The words echoed louder in his mind than the roaring engines outside. He realized now, the way he measured worth, through wealth, fame, status, was shallow, empty. It wasn't too late to change. But it would demand a humility he wasn't sure he possessed. Yet, sometimes the people who seem most ordinary have the most extraordinary lessons to teach us. And sometimes, if you're lucky, life gives you the rare chance to become someone better, not through lectures, but through witnessing true greatness lived in quiet moments. Victor gathered his things slowly, walking off the plane not as a businessman, but perhaps for the first time in decades, simply as a man, ready to learn. But Keanu's journey of quiet impact didn't end there. Tomorrow, on a crowded subway train in New York City, a single, unnoticed act of kindness would ripple out in ways no one could have predicted. Stay tuned. You won't believe how one small moment can change everything.